Hi, I'm Denise. We're going to load the quilt frame with multiple projects. This video is a video to accompany the PowerPoint video that was previously recorded. So if you've missed that, you'll want to go back to the Learning Center and be sure to watch that. I'm on a 12-foot frame. This is the Phoenix 12-foot frame. And when you have 12 feet, why not use it all? So a couple things. If you look at the end of my frame down here, I have a small child's bed quilt here, or lap quilt, and it's a cheater panel. So here I've got a backing by itself, and then I've got a backing that fills the rest of the whole frame. So with this, I'm going to put a lot of different projects on the frame at one time. So what I want to show you is something that I do. I find placemats, table runners, all kinds of things, and I start lining them up on how I might quilt them. Now these are some of the things that I have quilted this way in the past. So this is a runner, so I might stick it here. Keep in mind that this is important to know that the back is going to be the same fabric on some of these. It could be a separate one like you see on the end down here. Okay, but across here the backing is all the same. I'm going to put these on the frame that utilizes the best space. So I think I'm going to move this one and slide this up so this one would fit in there nicely. I'll probably use the same batting or whatever product is that I'm going to use to quilt with. Maybe I'll slide this one sideways this way and this one sideways this way, which will give me room to do a couple more placemats. So I would then quilt these, and when I roll, I would add my next pieces. Now, what I want to show you is that just like here, this little piece, and see the back on this one, these were all quilted together. 26 different table runners, placemats, and little wall hangings I had on the quilt frame at once. The backings were a bunch of fabrics that I sewed together to make one large back. The battings were either all the same or pieces of batting that I laid up there. As I quilt, I would base down if I need to, or I would also go in and make the design fit within the space. So here, these were not basted, but some of them I based as I go. So it really depends on what it is, whether I'm going to baste as I go. So then once I roll, then I add more pieces to the quilt frame. So here's a little cheater quilt. This quilt, it's actually not a cheater quilt. It's a donation quilt, and this quilt is made from large blocks and pieces of fabric. So this could be a quilt that's put on here and takes up a large amount of space, and then I would utilize the rest of the space for smaller projects. So on my front door, I have a little wall hanging that I trade in and out. And so this piece here would be for my front door. And this could go alongside of that quilt. And the thread colors could be pretty much the same. So this is kind of a neutrally taupe and burgundies, along with this is the same color scheme. So those could be quilted with the same threads. Now, if it happens that I'm going to put something else on that is a different color in the background, might remain the same. So this particular quilt, the background is the same taupes that are in that other quilt. So I might quilt in here, and then I'm going to take this to my Baby Lock Sashiko machine, and I'm actually going to use the Sashiko to go around these designs and quilt these. I have to determine if this border would work well with the same color thread. So the bobbin really wouldn't matter, but that outer border, would I use the taupe? Probably not. But you know what? That burgundy color in these, if I used a burgundy thread, would probably work just fine, because these have a very dark burgundy and it would really show up in there. So again, weigh out what you're quilting to figure out if it would fit. On the same frame, I would add this piece. Now as I roll, that might fill the second roll of things. The third roll, I might go with something different. Now remember, on the end I have a pink and purpley quilt. The other choice I have is to use a monofilament, a smoke monofilament for all of these things. So it's really your choice, or you could change your threads. Now keep in mind, you wouldn't want to change it for every project, but maybe every couple projects. Here's another taupe one that I would put on with these, and I would put it sideways just as you see it here. This is a little chart to measure as a child's growing. You can put their measurements and write it right on the chart with a Pigma pen, and that would be really quite fun. So I want you to think about this as you're loading the frame with multiple projects. You can use the same back or not. You can sew them together, or as you saw here, they could be two separate pieces. Down here at the end, we have two separate pieces, and let me turn the camera so you can see. So here are two separate pieces. It's not sewed together, okay? Or it could have been. Depends really on the size difference. The thing that I like is all the pieces that I'm doing will use the same thread on top and the same thread on the bobbin. That becomes important, that the thread colors aren't changed all the time. So, multiple projects. Here's some other things to think about. Placemats and table runners. So I'm going to grab a placemat and table runner and show you a set that I'm going to put on the frame and how this would even work with what we're doing. So this set of placemat and table runners, you could do it as a cheater panel, and that would mean that I'm not going to cut them apart and put borders on them. So I could lay it on the fabric like this and stitch it out. So it could go like that. I could stitch each placemat. I have 8 of those. Or we could cut these apart, add a border, and then stitch them with the border, baste them down as we go, and then sew or quilt them all on the same piece. Along with that set, there are coordinate fabrics that came. It was a kit that I picked up. Coordinate fabrics that came, along with fabric to make a table runner. So with this, my thought was I could take and make 8 placemats, 2 table runners, 1 small little like candle piece, and put them all on the frame with 1 piece of fabric. So truthfully, the backing that I have on the frame right now is the backing that I chose for this piece. Now, the backing I have is 60 wide home deck fabric. It's a leftover piece that I had from when I covered my chairs in my kitchen and made my curtains. So I thought, what a perfect way to do multiple amount of things on the frame at once. The thing that I would like is I would like the placemats and table runners to be reversible. So I'm going to be sure that I put things on the frame specifically if I want the placemats all alike, or for me, if it doesn't matter, then I'll just put the pieces on there, and what it ends up being is what it ends up being. Because it's a striped fabric, it would be really fun that all of them would be different. They don't necessarily have to be the same. So a couple things to think about again. Same bobbin color, same top thread. Baste as you go. Now I'm using the Quilt Magician with this, and I would set up my quilting area all the way to the far left of the frame, all the way past that blue and lavender colored quilt. So my upper right would be way out here, all the way to the end, and my upper left, and my lower right would be all the way down and over to this corner right there. Even though the fabric ends here, I'm going to tell it to here, because if I continue to go with more pieces or a back that's bigger, it's easier to tell it the whole quilt space than it would be to start all over again. So you have 8-foot frame, you have a 10-foot frame, you have a 12-foot frame, whatever size your frame is, load it up and quilt, quilt, quilt. And I'm sure you'll enjoy being able to put multiple projects on the frame at one time. Happy quilting!